وإن كنتم في ريب مما نزلنا على عبدنا فأتوا بسورة من مثله وادعوا شهداءكم من دون الله إن كنتم صادقين فإن لم تفعلوا ولن تفعلوا فاتقوا النار التي وقودها الناس والحجارة أعدت للكافرين. صدق الله العظيم. From ayat number 23 of Surat Al-Baqarah, the khitabat, or the addresses to the disbelievers, the kuffar. As was already mentioned yesterday, that these ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the beginning of Surat Al-Baqarah, mentioned three categories of human beings in regards to His kalam, the kalam of Allah, the Quran. There are those who accept the Quran as kalam Allah, adopted in their life, believe in it. Their qualities are very clear, their qualities were mentioned. There is a second group of those who reject the kalam Allah, reject the Quran. They don't believe. And their case is very clear, not too much explanation was needed regarding their qualities. There's a third group, they try to play treachery, a two-sided game. They are two-faced. The case was ambiguous, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in a very beautiful manner, explained their qualities. From ayat number 21, and more specifically ayat number 22, we find the mirror image of the end result of these three groups. For the munafiqeen, or the hypocrites, they're reminded of the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these favors are mentioned to them so that it may cure the disease of nifaq, it may cure the disease of hypocrisy in their hearts. In these ayat number 23 and 24, the end result of the kuffar is mentioned. The disbelievers first are given an ultimatum that if you truly and you really reject this kalam, this Quran, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them an ultimatum that bring a surah like the surah of this Quran. And if you can't do it, which you'll never be able to do it, then just prepare yourself for the fire of Jahannam. First we'll go over the tarjuma, the translation of these ayat. Then we'll try to get into the tafseer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in ayat number 23, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِّمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا. And if you are in doubt regarding what we have revealed to our abd, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, فَأَتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِهِ. Bring a surah like this surah, or a surah from like the surah of the Quran. وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُمْ. And call for witnesses. مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. Other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. If you're telling the truth. فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا, but just remember that if you cannot do it, if you cannot bring a surah like this surah, وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا, and you will never be able to do it, فَاتَّقُوا النَّارِ, then just fear the fire. وَقُودَهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةِ, the fuel of that fire is man and stones. أُعِدَّتْ لِلْكَافِرِينَ, that fire has been prepared for the disbelievers. Ayat number 23 and ayat number 24. This is the tarjuma, the translation of these two ayat. Now the tafseer, or brief tafseer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا, if you are in doubt regarding what we have revealed to our abd, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It should be made very clear that in the very first ayat of Surat al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a very, very bold claim. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ, that is that great book, this Quran, this Kalamullah is that great book. La rayba fih, there's no doubt in it. There's no doubt in the fact that this is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You open this Quran from the beginning to the end, you will not find any doubt. You will not find any phrases that contradict one another. And you will not find any aspect of the Quran where some part of the Quran may seem that the eloquence has gone down or some message has gone down. Throughout the whole Quran from beginning to end, any ayat you take, you'll find the highest level of eloquence. You'll find the best form of the message being given. So that was in the very, very first ayah of Surah Al-Baqarah. Here in ayat number 23, since the disbelievers, they don't want to believe in the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses them that, listen, we have already made a bold claim that there's no doubt in this Quran. But for the sake of argument, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا, if you are still in doubt, you have some doubt, some raib in what we have revealed to our abd, this whole Quran, if you have any kind of doubt in it, or you can find something doubtful in it, go and try. And this is also again addressed to the kuffar who do not believe in this Quran. They try to find doubts with it, they try to find mistakes. You will not find any mistake in the whole Quran. فَأَتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِّثْلِهِ, if you find that there's some mistake, some doubt in this Quran from what we revealed to our abd, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam with this most beautiful quality, abd, the best slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who showed his level of humbleness and the level of sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The highest title that can ever be given to anyone is someone that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala claims that this is my slave, my servant. You know, in our society, if someone's child or son becomes successful, and not only successful, they reach such a stage that no one else can get to that level. The general mindset is somebody who gets, in our society now, in this time and age, someone gets this high degree, and along with that degree reaches such a position that is a very noteworthy, respectable position. So in a gathering or in a group, the person always likes to say, that's my child. Out of pride. He says, my child. Why? They want to take some credit for raising the child, even though they may have had very little to do with the success of this child. No? And they do this because they're very proud of their children. And that is the relationship as creation that we have. The strongest relationship we can have as creation are parents and children. At least the parents can take some credit, or at least they try to take all the credit for the success of their children. If the child is not successful, so Each parent will blame the other parent. His mother raised him like this. The wife says, oh, it was because of his fathers. Right? But if they're successful, then each one wants that credit. But that is a case of us creation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Rabbul Alameen. And if He is Rabbul Alameen, if He is the Rabb of the creation, then our relationship with Rabbul Alameen is that we are the Abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The ibad and the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the highest title that we could ever have is if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses us and claims that we are His Abd. There's a sense of pride that this is my Abd. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses that term for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam in a few places in the Quran. One of them is also here. نَزَّلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا. That which we have revealed on our Abd. Which is the highest level of pride that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows in the status of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So the addresses to the kuffar, if you think there's something doubtful, or you find something doubtful in this Quran, then here's a challenge. فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِهِ. Bring a surah like this surah. Few things need to be pointed out here. It's not in human standards, and we'll come back to the Quran. Let's talk about human standards. One of the greatest aspects of language and eloquence is poetry. If a poem is only a few lines, then the vast majority of human beings can come up with something like it. If a poem is a little bit longer, you'll find it to be eloquent. Some people might be able to come up with it. If a poem is very long, and especially if it turns into some kind of aspect where they use language to describe language, and it turns into a story, very lengthy, often at times the writer who's writing, in that lengthy process, there will be some parts that won't make sense. Human weakness and human limitations. Not only that, because it is so long, anyone in their imagination can come up with something like it. Right? You can take so many examples. When we go to our books, how many books are there on one topic? And then how many books mimic other books? How many you can read? That you have a story about a specific person or a specific event. Sometimes it's fiction, and all of a sudden you'll have other books that we talk about almost the same thing. They're almost mirror images of each other. Why? Because human capacity, the longer we get, the easier it gets for someone to make it, or someone to challenge it. There are two parts. The shorter it is, the easier it gets, and the longer it is, the easier it gets. In the middle, some may have a special gift. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. If it is too short, there are some people that can come up with any poem like it. And if it is too long, someone can come up with something like it. In the middle, there may be some that are unique, if they're a medium size. And if there's somebody who really has a gift, they can even memorize it and use it. So this is human capacity. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places these ayat. There are a few ayat in the Quran where a challenge is given to mankind. The challenge of bringing something like the Quran. In Surah Al-Isra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts the challenge that if all of mankind and all of you jinn kind, لَإِنِ اجْتَمَعَتِ الْإِنسُ وَالْجِنِّ أَنْ يَأْتُوا بِمِثْلِ هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ لَا يَأْتُونَ بِمِثْلِهِ وَلَوْ كَانَ بَعْضُهُمْ لِبَعْضٍ ظَهِيرًا. If all of you mankind and jinn kind, you were to get together, I said jinn kind, not that that's a real word. All of you mankind and all of you jinn were to get together to try to bring something like this Quran, you'll never be able to do it. Even if you support one another. وَلَوْ كَانَ بَعْضُهُمْ لِبَعْضٍ ظَهِيرًا. Even if you give support to one another. It's impossible to come up with something like this Quran. In a few places in the Quran, the challenge comes less and less. You find in one ayat of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَمْ يَقُولُونَ افْتَرَاهُ قُلْ فَأْتُوا بِعَشْرِ سُوَرٍ مِثْلِهِ. In Surah Hud, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that, are they claiming that this Quran has been forged? Then tell them, bring 10 surahs like the surahs of the Quran. And these ayat are strategically placed in very unique places. The 10 surahs of the Quran is placed in Surah Hud. And when we get to the tafsir of Surah Hud, we'll discuss it. But let's come to this ayah. This ayat is in Surah Al-Baqarah. Surah Al-Baqarah is the longest surah of the Quran. It is the longest surah. We all know this. This is not some secret. It is the longest surah of the Quran. And what is unique about this long surah of the Quran, as I just mentioned, that the longer something becomes in human capacity, the more chances we have of making mistakes, and the more chances we have of losing the eloquent system, or the level of eloquence. Even the poetry, it dies out. You find some of these artists who write poetry, or even they have some songs that they make, they lose even the rhythm of what they're saying. The rhythm dies out. They just start making up words just to rhyme that make no sense whatsoever. No? Why? Because human capacity can only go so far. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing the disbeliever that here, take this surah, Surah Al-Baqarah, the longest surah in the Quran. Bring one surah like this surah of the Quran if you're claiming that this is the kalam of a human being. If you're claiming that this is made by a human being, so a human being would have not been able to keep this level of eloquence from the beginning of the surah to the end of the surah. If you see the eloquence, if you understood Baqarah, and I don't have time to go into the eloquence of the Quran, subhanallah, the baligh, what a baligh kitab, what an eloquent book. And you go into each ayat of Surah Al-Baqarah. How beautiful that when you recite it, you do not get stuck, that some word that doesn't come flow on your tongue. The beautiful words that are used, and not only that, the words that are used have such deep meaning. And this again, human weakness, that eventually we'll run out of words, or the words won't really fit with what we're trying to explain. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts this challenge to the kuffar. And then bring a surah like this, Surah Al-Baqarah. If we think that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shaniyaka huwa al-abtar, the shortest surah in the Quran. One sahabi, he wrote it. They used to have, at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, whenever, at that time, language was the power of the time. That is why they used to call everyone else ajam, people who didn't understand how to talk. Arab, they considered themselves the most eloquent. So whenever someone used to write a line of poetry, they used to put it on the door of Kaaba as a challenge, that if someone can, nowadays we call it the Guinness Book of World Records. If somebody comes up with the next record, so they'll get that award. So they used to put this poem there, and if someone could bring a better poem, so that other poem used to be taken down, and the more eloquent poem was left on the door of Kaaba. So one sahabi, he wrote, Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar, the shortest surah in the Quran, put it on the door of Kaaba. So after a few weeks, nobody could. If people would pass by, they would just kind of dazzle that what kind of eloquence is this? Only 3 ayat, short ayat. And they were just looking. These 3 ayat comprise of only 10 words. They were just, how these 10 words, and so deep, we can't even come up with something to challenge this. So there was one very great poet, he was passing by and he was standing for a long few days, he was just standing staring at it. He come back the next day, he was staring. So after some time he just wrote one line, Ma hadha qawlul bashar in hadha illa qawlun kareem. He said, this is not the word of a man, this is some very honorable, this is something else, This is not human words. Even the people who understand what eloquence is, they can acknowledge that, this is not something that is human. So that's the shortest surah. Come to the longest surah. You might say, okay, somewhere in Surah Al-Baqarah there might be some mistake. You have 286 ayat. Or somewhere some ayat might not make sense. Or somewhere there might be some mistake. Or somewhere there might be some contradiction. Because as human beings, when we write, even the longest chapter of something, those who are familiar with writing, once you finish writing, you have to give it to somebody to proofread it. Because if they don't proofread, so what happens? You can have mistakes. You have contradictions. It's the human capacity. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this Quran, there was no need for proofreading. Even somebody who was proofreading had to correct himself because the Quran was so eloquent, it fixed their language. That's how deep the Quran is. And that's just the eloquent nature. What about the topics of Surah Al-Baqarah? What about the subject matter? What about the message? It's so deep that there's not a single mistake. And not only that, forget mistake, there's no doubt. There's no doubts left in Surah Al-Baqarah. That someone can say, I didn't understand some topic of Surah Al-Baqarah. If you open Surah Al-Baqarah, maybe in other surahs there are some indications towards other masail, but in Surah Al-Baqarah itself, everything is explained so beautifully and in such detail that there is no topic that is left where a person might afterwards think that there's something that is not clear if you read it in context. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put this challenge to the Quraysh, that okay, they bring a surah like this, Surah Al-Baqarah. And not only that, the name also, why this name was taken. The story behind, as was already mentioned in the beginning, and we'll get to that story, the story of greed. Now how dangerous greed can be. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this, فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِ. And not only this, that bring a surah like the surah of the Quran, وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ. And call all of your witnesses other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of your partners, anyone that is willing to help you, that also claims that this Quran may have something doubtful in it. Then put together all of your partners, take as much help as you need. If you think you can come up with a kalam like the kalamullah. That challenge, this challenge was presented to the Quraysh with the most eloquent in Arabic language. Till today, until Akhirah, till the Day of Judgment, no one has ever brought anything even close to the Quran in beauty, in eloquence, in message, in depth. No one has ever brought something like the Quran that people will accept and people will read so much also. As Muslims, we read the Quran more than anything else in our life. In Salah, for those who pray Salah, even day-to-day life, how many ayat we know. If nothing else, many of us come from a place called back home. And everybody back home believes that somebody did some kind of magic to them, or somebody did some kind of... So everybody has some ruqyah, that they're reciting some ayat, some portions of the Quran they're reading every single day. Some people read for barakah, for blessing. Some people read for removal of poverty. The Quran has so much impact and so much effect. So this Quran is recited so much, there's no other book in human history that can even come close. Other books you might read. You read it once, you may like it. You read it second. Eventually a time comes, when you read it the 10th, 15th time, you get tired of it. And the shorter it is, the faster you get tired of it. If it is one line, how many times will you say, yeah, that sounded really nice, First time it may sound nice, second time. Eventually a point comes, 10, 15 times, we get tired of it. And even those 10, 15 times, we might say it after, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. But you come to our daily salah. All of us are, mashallah, hafiz of Qul Huwallahu Ahad. This is what we read in every rak'ah, mashallah. Huh? Yes? In every rak'ah, how many rak'ah in the day? 20 rak'ah. And almost every rak'ah we're reading this. What about Surah Al-Fatiha? Every rak'ah we read. When have we ever become tired of it? Has it ever come when we start salah and then we start thinking, man, this is so tiring. Or maybe I've lost my flavor for it. Has it ever happened? What about the other things we listen to? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us for those who listen to music or for those who listen to something that is not appropriate. How many times can you listen to it? First time it may dazzle you, second time. Eventually a point comes, a person is so tired of it, he doesn't even want to hear it, Throws it. He's trying to look for the next, whatever. But look at the Quran. First time you hear, second time, after 100 times you read. How many times we've read in our life? How many times we read just today, Surah Al-Fatiha? And yet, have we ever become tired of it? And mashallah, it's on autoplay, We say Allahu Akbar, we don't even think it. Subhanallah, it's autoplay, it's automatic, Yes? Other things, even you might practice few times after something, you're so tired of it, fed up with it. That's how beautiful the Quran is. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with this challenge, answers this challenge. He tells the kuffar, فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا. If you have never been able to do this, you have never ever done this. In human history, no one has ever come with anything even close to the Quran. In fact, the Quran, it has sparked its own unique system. There's nothing like the Quran. So in the system of poetry and in the system of, it has its own genre of how beautiful it is. So in human history, no one has ever come with something like this Quran. From the beginning of mankind, from the beginning of creation. This is what lam taf'alu. فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَلَنْ تَفْعَلُوا. And you will never ever be able to do it for the rest of eternity. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, since ever and forever, you will never be able to come up with something like this Quran. So understand the consequences of rejecting this Quran or doubting this Quran. فَاتَّقُوا النَّارِ. Then just fear the fire. Indirectly saying, then prepare yourself for the fire. الَّتِي وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةِ. That fire, the fuel of which is man and stone. Now a few tafseer regarding the word stones. One is that the idols the people used to worship, they will also be in the fire of Jahannam. Another thing is that the fire that we have, based on how strong and powerful the material is, that is how hot and intense the fire is. If we have wood, it's only so intense. You have gas, it's only so intense. You have electricity, it's only so intense. The harder the material, the more intense the fire. The most intense fire comes from steel, which eventually comes from stones. In stone also we have charcoal. It's part of stone. How hot the fire of charcoal is. And how many other elements that we still have yet to know. How hot fire can be from stones. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the fuel of the fire of Jahannam will be man and stones. They're not the normal stones me and you know. They're the mountains. Some of these stones will be the size of planets. They'll be used for fuel for the fire of Jahannam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us and protect us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you can imagine the intensity of the fire of Jahannam is beyond our imagination. أُعِدَّتْ لِلْكَافِرِينَ. That fire is prepared for the disbelievers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save and protect us from the fire of Jahannam and give all of us the tawfiq to practice His deen. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغِ. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. اللهم نور قلوبنا بالقرآن وزين أخلاقنا بالقرآن ونجنا من النار بالقرآن وادخلنا في الجنة بالقرآن. اللهم اجعل القرآن لنا في الدنيا قرينا وفي القبر مونسا وعلى الصراط نورا وفي الجنة رفيقا ومن النار سترا وحجابا. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. سبحان الله بحمده.